was getting close to Christmas, and so gifts were being placed under trees in the Minecraft villages, and all the young villagers were very excited. But when the day came to open their presents, all every single child had, whether good or bad, was just a pile of coal. And that happened because of the selfish actions of the Kramper, who would later go on to destroy the world. Or so he would try. Thousands of years ago, the spirit of the overworld wanted a way of rewarding his people, as they had been respecting his world and just helping each other with their civilizations evolving, and seeing as those were his only two responsibilities and it was being done for him, it made his life very easy, and so he wanted to give back. And so on one winter night, he created a lesser, yet still very powerful spirit called the Spirited Elf. And his job was to, once a year, jump down to the overworld and gift presents to the civilizations of the overworld. And he will be tasked with doing this every year until the end of time. Now, he might have looked like an evil green goblin who was secretly going to do something bad eventually, but in reality, he was amazing at his job and he was incredibly efficient, as no one person ever lost out on a gift, and so everyone loved him for all the gifts that they were given. And for the first few years, this all worked great, as every year the villagers and the pillagers would all put up decorations in celebration of the Spirited Elf, so that on that Christmas morning, they would awake to these amazing gifts. However, there was a problem with this, as not every sentient being in the overworld was respecting the overworld, and not every being was benefiting the society and civilizations, as some were just vile, vicious and tyrannical creatures that were in fact causing the exact opposite of what the spirit had wanted, as many were killing innocent opponents and burning civilizations. And so to ensure that those evil creatures wouldn't be rewarded for their bad behavior, the overworld spirit created a new Christmas spirit, something that could balance out the actions of the Spirited Elf. And so using some of his magic, he was able to create the Kramper, a purple humanoid devil creature that was tasked with removing the gifts from those evil creatures and to instead give them coal. And the hope with this was that the coal would motivate these evil creatures into being better for the next year, so that they could get good gifts. And well, this new system was extremely successful, as now all the civilizations in the world were much nicer to one another, helping each other on a day-to-day basis, as none of them ever wanted to wake up on that Christmas morning just to get some coal. However, there was one downside to all of this, and that was that literally everyone hated the Kramper, because he was the symbol of being a disappointment to society. And the opposite was true for the Spirited Elf, as everyone loved him and his amazing gifts that he gave. But even with everyone else hating him, the Spirited Elf loved the Kramper and respected him greatly, as he believed that with them working together, they were making the world a better place. However, this respect that he was given just felt fake, as the Kramper felt that the Spirited Elf just seemed too perfect, and so the Kramper began to hate him. And well, when a godlike entity hates something, very rarely does anything good come as a result. And so that was the case on Christmas Eve, just over 5,000 years ago. As whilst both were preparing to leave the heavens of the overworld to give the rewards for being both good and bad to the overworld's inhabitants, that the Kramper attacked, as he had had enough of being hated by literally everyone. But the Kramper was smart in his attack, as he knew that he would likely be spotted, and if he was, the overworld spirit would likely kill him instantly. And so he disguised himself as the Nether Spirit, who was the long-term rival of the overworld spirits. And so whilst the Spirited Elf wasn't looking, he crept up behind and attacked. This surprise attack caught the elf off guard, and so before he could act, he was knocked unconscious. But that wasn't enough for the Kramper. He wanted more, and so he continued to attack and attack continuously, all whilst in his nether form, as he wanted to do as much damage as possible to his rival, and hopefully kill him, so that he, the Kramper, could hopefully take his role of being the positive gift giver and loved by society. But he was unable to kill him, as the spirits were immortal. And so after continuing with this ruthless bombardment of attacks for a number of minutes, he stopped and returned to his ordinary form. And then he began acting concerned for his friend as he shouted for the spirit.
Overlord Spirit, I need your help. The spirited elf has been injured.
The overlord spirit immediately teleported over and was horrified at what he saw.
It was the Nether Spirit.
Oh, I always suspect he would attack one of you two. But to do it now, well, that's just evil. So listen, this is what we will need to do. I'm going to have to spend the next few days giving my undivided attention healing him back to full health, as the Nether Spirit has clearly done quite some damage to him. As for you, young one, for this year and this year alone, you are going to be tasked with both your normal responsibilities and the responsibilities of your fallen best friends during these celebrations. I know you've always wanted to do this, so good luck. I need to help your friend now.
And so the spirit ran away, carrying the remains of the spirited elf, preparing to heal him. Had that just worked? The Kramper thought he had, and it was evil what he had done, injuring the elf to that extreme extent, but to him, this was the only way he saw of being able to give the presents to the people, and hopefully now he was going to get the respect he felt he deserved and become a loved being. And so he finished off the preparations and began to jump from the heavens of the spirits down to the overworld. He arrived in the snowy tundra and he saw that he was right by a village and it was already night. He was running behind schedule. He had work to do and he assumed that giving the actual good presents was just like giving coal. You sneak in, place the coal under the tree and run out. And so he snuck into the village. But just for some fun, he decided to jump through the chimney, just like the spirited elf did. And then he crept towards the tree before placing down the present and running out of the house. It was a very simple plan and it was successful. And so he did that for almost every single house within that snowy village. That was way easier than he thought it was going to be. And so quickly, he travelled to the next village and gave them gifts, before travelling to the next village and giving them gifts. And then he repeated this hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of times every second. Everything was going great and he believed that in the morning he was going to become that beloved creature. Until that changed. As whilst in one house in a savannah village, he was spotted as a young villager was waiting by the tree in anticipation of the presents in the morning. Originally, the Kramper was just planning to run past him, place the gifts, and leave. But before he could do that, the young villager spoke.
Wait, are you the Kramper? No, we haven't been bad this year. Go get the spirited elf. We want actual presents.
The Kramper was taken aback and was going to explain that inside the presents were actual gifts, not coal this year, and that he was the good guy this year and he should love him. But he was rudely interrupted by that villager.
Listen, we just don't want you. You're just a worse version of the spirited elf. So just go away with your disgusting coal.
The Kramper was quite upset to hear just how badly this villager thought of him, but it didn't matter. Maybe other villagers would be much nicer, and when they all saw their wonderful presents, they'll all love and respect him, right? And so he continued travelling to more and more villages, leaving more and more gifts. But again, every few thousand villages or so, a young villager would spot him and would say something along the same lines about him just being a worse version of the elf. And so after hearing this from so many villagers, the Kramper started to feel as if he was just truly despised here and no one will ever love him. And so he decided to give all these villagers and pillagers the same attitude that they had decided to give him, as
no villager should get a present if they all hate me so much. They all deserve just coal. Nothing more, nothing less.
And so the Kramper lifted up his arm and summoned coal. Lots and lots of coal. And then, using some of his basic spiritual magic, he transformed all of the gifts they had given, as well as all the future gifts too, into bags of coal. As this year, everyone was getting coal. No one was getting actual gifts, as no one wanted him. and before the sun came up, the Kramper had been able to give every single villager or pillager their gift of coal. And so as the sun began to rise, and with his gift giving complete, the Kramper returned home, ready for some rest after a hard long night of giving coal. But as the sun rose on that morning, every villager and every pillager and every player all woke up to the same thing, as they all woke up to disappointment, as only coal laid under their trees. They had spent so long decorating just for coal. This sense of disappointment and sadness within the overworld was so strong amongst everyone that even the spirit of the overworld could sense it. And so seeing that at that point he was able to heal the spirited elf to a somewhat stable condition, he decided to stop the healing process, just temporarily, to investigate this cause and fix it, as nothing should cause this much mental suffering. And so he used some of his powers to look into the past to see what happened, and he was shocked as he was witnessing the Kramper, his very own creation who was made to obey, going against his orders and causing mass suffering in his world. This made the overworld spirit very angry, as
No one makes my people suffer.
And so he ran over to the Kramper, who was sleeping at the time, to talk to him. However, the overworld spirit was so overcome in rage, and so he didn't stop to ask why. He just began attacking, as he felt so offended that anyone would ever dare to hurt his beloved people. And so he began to rip the Kramper apart. However, he wasn't dying.
You cannot kill me. I am made of you, and so I am immortal.
Maybe so, but now you'll have to suffer all of their pain combined.
And so the overworld spirit held out his hand, and every single piece of coal that was wrongfully placed was dragged from the overworld and now surrounded the Kramper. He was in immense pain, as the overworld spirit was the most powerful deity in existence, and he had been struck multiple times with him with his full strength. And then, just as it seemed like he could die, the Kramper let out his final words.
I just wanted to be respected. They will love me one day.
No, they won't.
And then the spirit ordered all of the coal to compress onto the Kramper. He was stuck, he couldn't move, and with all the pressure from the coal around him, he began to fuse into the coal, and then the coal had gone through so much pressure that it had now become a crystal, and the Kramper was stuck inside. And so the overworld spirit picked up this giant crystal and threw it away from the heavens and into the oceans. Was that the end of the Kramper? To be stuck inside the crystal forever and to never get the chance of being loved? Well, no, as he was still conscious, and even inside that crystal, he had somehow been able to retain much of his powers. He just couldn't move anymore. And so he let out a loud roar in all this frustration. But that roar was loud. Very loud, in fact. So much so that some local fishermen who were just trying to fish up treasure, hoping to find something good after getting nothing for Christmas, hear it. And they think that this could be their calling to find some treasure. And so many began sailing towards it. But as these sailors got closer and closer, the crystal began to glow as the Kramper felt happy. Someone was finally coming to him, and he felt that he was finally going to be recognized and appreciated, even if he was in a crystal form. But as these fishermen began getting to him, they began to talk about
removing that crystal and breaking it up to sell.
Hearing that made the Kramper realize that no one was coming for him, as no one wanted him. And so, using his powers, he was very quickly able to manipulate the oceans nearby and consume the sailors, taking their life force. Quickly, legends were spread of this event as everyone was fascinated by the phenomena caused by this crystal, and so many would go to see it, but all the explorers that would ever try to touch it would die, as the crystal would steal their life force, as he didn't want anyone coming close to him anymore, as he now understood that he was hated. But as quickly as these terrifying legends spread, they would fade, as the villagers would move on with their lives, as they had far more important things to do than just concern themselves with a magical crystal that, to some, didn't even believe existed. And so, just a few thousand years later, no one knew about the crystal, and no one knew about the Kramper, as now they had both been completely forgotten. Until one day, when a skeleton somehow finds the crystal, and when he does, a monster is created. But to learn more about that, you'll need to watch this video.